Hello and welcome along to Mondo Chelloveck Movies. My name is John and this is going to be my top 10 albums of all time. Now I own all of these albums apart from one and I'll get into that a little bit later on. So I played all these albums to death and I consider these albums to be some of the most solid albums ever made. I think I can put these on and I can just wallow in what this album has to offer. So some bands that I like, I don't consider them to have made a classic album in my eyes. I think that some of them might have had a half decent album or they might have had a good best of. But I'm not going to put any best ofs into here. These are going to be just albums released by the group. But these are all on CD, like I say, minus one, but I'll get into that. So at number 10, I've got 2001's The Green Album by Weezer. Now, Weezer were always a favourite band of mine. And when they first started in 94, I thought, when I heard some of the songs, I thought these can really write songs. I'm a big fan of people or musicians who can actually write classic songs or classic tunes. Now, Rivers Cuomo, he can really write a good song. And I think that all of the albums up until a certain point were really good classic albums. I must admit, I don't care that much for Weezer these days. I think the new albums they've got, I don't understand why they're releasing like pop albums these days. Now what they did was, the album after this, the two albums after this, they recorded loads of demos which are never used. Now the demos that they've got from there, from about 2002, they're all absolutely brilliant and it's got some really good tunes on it. But they are not they haven't recorded them or anything. You can get them on sort of like online on bootlegs and stuff, but you can't actually get physical releases of them. Now they are, to me, they're much better than any song they put out now. I don't understand where they're going with their stuff, but anyway, that's for another video. This band here, I think they vanished in 1996 and we thought had to split up, or they're going to make anything else, and then in 2001 they came back with this album. Now it was a big thing to say, will Weezer actually be like Weezer anymore? Will it be able to write a good song? Will it be able to put this album out? Will it be able to sort of wow us like they did back in the day? And I've got to say that every song on this album is just absolutely brilliant. The tunes on here are some of the best tunes I think that Rivers has ever wrote. And for me, the standout songs in here, there's a lot of standout songs on here. Actually, there's a song here called Don't Let Go, the first song. Now, my band, Mondo Chelloveck, have covered that song. We've got one singing by Wolfie Warploy, is singing the vocals on one version, and also the Debs is singing on the other version, and she's told me on no uncertain terms that nobody in the world has ever got to hear that one. I think she sounds quite good, but I can't believe she actually sang on it. So you've got other ones. You've got a single in here called Hash Pipe, which was it was a decent record, but I really just thought like Island and Sun was much better. But for me, the song that I think on here is the best one is Knockdown Dragout. I think that's where this album from start to finish, it's just absolutely brilliant. It's got a bonus song in here called I Do, and to me, if you want to listen to Weezer, you hear the first album. The first album is a Stone Cold classic, but for some reason I just think that this album is my most listenable album by Weezer, and I think it's the one that, to me, they came back with a bang, and they wrote some of their best songs on here. And unfortunately, I don't think they've recreated a full album of good songs. I think they've done some great songs on some other albums, but just for some reason they haven't sort of put the whole lot on one album like they did with this one. Maybe in their 5-year hiatus, they had a chance to cherry pick the best tunes out and release them on this album. It's really strange that the album came out 5 years later and it's a very short album. You would imagine that they would have done a double album or something because it had so many songs, but for some reason all the other songs on this album didn't really make the cut, and they are available, like I say, online, but they just vanished. And I do think that their stuff they release now is unfortunately subpar to me. So at number 10, that's the Green Album by Weezer. So at number 9 is 1979's The Metal Box by Public Image Limited. Now, Public Image Limited, or PIL, is the band that John Lydon, aka Johnny Rotten, started after the Sex Pistols imploded in 1978. And this is the second album by PIL. Now, this one here, for me, is a one that's, it's funny because the album after this, The Flowers of Romance, I really enjoy, and I used to listen to that on a loop. But for some reason, I do think that this album is by far the better album. Now, when I first heard this album, and I did used to have it on the original 12-inch metal box, metal tin, used to jump all over the place, and I was pulling my hair out trying to think, this is just so annoying. But anyway, I've got it on CD here. And this album is very experimental. Now, at the time in 1979, don't forget that punk had just really finished. From 77 till 78 was the height of it, and 79 it was starting to tail off. Now what happened was a thing called post-punk. This is where a lot of punk bands or bands influenced by punk started up. You know, the likes of Joy Division, Killing Joke, Bauhaus, and they were forging ahead. Now Pill sort of was on the front edge of that, especially with this album. It's one of the best post-punk albums of all time. Now it's really well produced as well. It's got some amazing bass playing on here by Jaw Wobble, and he is heard on this album and the previous album, First Issue, but he's not on any more albums. I think they had a fallout, him and John Lydon, even though they're friends, good friends at sort of school and that. This album for me has some great songs on it. It also has some really strange songs on, some very long songs on it. And for me, the standout songs in here is a song called Careering. I think it's absolutely brilliant. There's also another one called Graveyard, which is the B-side. It's called Another. This has got no vocals on, but Another, which is a B-side, which is exactly the same song as Graveyard, but with vocals. Sounds great as well. This has 4 sides. It had a 12-inch version, three 12 inches, and they had two 12 inches and had 4 sides, I believe. Or was it 3 12 inches with 6 sides? Wow. But you had songs like Albatross, which was 10 minutes long. You had 2 singles on here. You had Memories, and you had Death Disco, which on this album is called Swan Lake, and it's slightly different. You had a great song here called Pop Tones. You had No Birds, which is another B-side, which is absolutely brilliant. Another one called The Suit, which was like the bass on it is so rumbling you can hardly play it in the car. And another one called Bad Baby, which is another brilliant song. That I think that for some reason the early incarnation of Pill really hit the mark with this album, and I don't think they topped it. And I know that the next one they had was just purely like drums and stuff like that, called The Flowers of Romance, which was by far, for me, it was one that I just listened to all the time because I was so into me drumming that I listened to it a lot. But I had to keep going back to this one because this one for me is the best ever Pill album and it's the most complete album, even though there's some strange stuff on it. So that's at number 9. That's The Metal Box by Pill. So the next album is an album that I used to listen to all the time. It was easily my number 1 album for a long time. It slipped down a little bit here, but the unfortunate thing is that I've heard it that many times, and there's other bands that have came out with other, I wouldn't consider better stuff, but stuff that I listen to more. But I can consider this album to be an absolute blast right from start to finish. There's no duff songs on it. It's one of the best punk albums you will ever hear in your life. So at number 8 it is, of course, 1977's Never Mind the Bollocks by the Sex Pistols. Now this album is absolutely brilliant. Ignore that. It's definitely not that. This has got an extra disc in, which is all the demos from this album. And this, what can I say about this album? I've listened to this album quite a lot recently. Sometimes I go quite a few years without listening to this music, but then I get back into it. I do like the Great Rock and Roll Swindle as well. I love that album. This is a more focused album. Great Rock and Roll Swindle is good to listen to. I'll get a blast out of it. But for some reason, this album is the more complete album. It's got so many good songs on it. It's unbelievable. It's got all the songs that you would imagine from here. I think that my favourite on here has got to be Bodies. It's the one it's got the best tune, I think. But there's other ones like I'm very much into EMI at the minute. The one I've been listening to recently. Deborah likes EMI, but she doesn't really like much of the other songs. She doesn't like Bodies, that's for sure. But I think that this album has got some great solid songs on it. It's one of those ones that's iconic. I mean, it's just everyone who hears this album, I would imagine the people who haven't heard this album, if there is anybody in the world who hasn't heard this album, they've just got to go and experience this. And in 1977/1978, when I first heard this album, I couldn't believe what I was hearing. It was like nothing I'd ever heard of before. It was like a light bulb moment. You thought, wow, this type of music actually exists, and I'm hearing this for the first time. So for me, whatever type of music I was listening to before this just stopped. After this was like the moment when I thought, right, I am listening to punk now and nothing else. And I did listen to it for a long time. And anything that wasn't punk, I wouldn't listen to and I wouldn't entertain, no matter how good it was, no matter how groundbreaking it was. I wouldn't just say, no, it's not punk enough. I had to listen to stuff like this. So I was a bit kind of tunnel vision with it, but it really, honestly, it made me think about maybe writing music. It made me think about playing the drums. Actually, the drummer here, Paul Cook, he's a great drummer, and he's still going today. I've got to go and see his band, The Professionals, who are still going. Just to see him, just to meet him if I can, that'd be absolutely brilliant. Just to say to him, you are the person who made me want to play the drums. This album is just, for me, it was like groundbreaking. It was one of the times when I thought, right, I just had to just put everything to one side and just concentrate on punk. But these were my favourite punk band for such a long time. I had books and videos and anything you can imagine just about these. I couldn't get enough of them. So every now and again I get this album out and put it through its paces. I've got to listen to the album in full. Can never cherry pick a song. I just think that it's like one you've got to listen from start to finish because it's that good. So number 8, that's Nevermind the Bollocks by the Sex Pistols. So I don't know if this has happened to anybody else, but when you're in a group of friends, you seem to pick favourite bands. Mine was the Sex Pistols, and other people had different bands, or all punk bands. And this band here was the favourite band of the guitarist from Demolition Progress, Nobby Hendrix. He couldn't get enough of this band. He'd seen them live loads of times. He used to play all the records. All the times when he went around his house, he'd play all the records. And I used to say to him, no, it's not as good as the Sex Pistols. Don't want to know. Even though I thought they were quite good, I would never sort of admit it to him. And other people wouldn't admit it to him who liked different bands. So one day he was playing this album because he said, I've got a new album by them. And he put it on and I thought, this is really good, this. So I thought, I'll have another couple of listens to it. And I just thought, no, that this is absolutely spectacular. So number 7 is 1982's Strawberries by The Damned. This album is like a perfect album. It's just every song is brilliant on it, and also it's not really straight out punk, even though there is a lot of punk in it. The band has like moved on a little bit. They're playing stuff that is a bit like there's some really fast punk on here, and there's also some kind of pop songs in a way. There's even like sort of 60s. I can't even describe it. There's bits where they play the harpsichord. Also on here, there's a strange drum beat that plays in the middle of the records, and you don't know what it is because it keeps coming back and it keeps going away. Now it doesn't come on to the proper song on the last song, which is called Don't Bother Me, and it plays all the way through that, and I just think it's just brilliant. I just love all of the things that happen here. So everything from the 1982 incarnation of The Damned is on here. I think it's great they've got the singles and the B-sides on here because there's some great songs in there. There's also 3 or 4 songs which I've never heard before, which weren't released before this album. So Strawberries didn't really have any big hits on it, but I've got to say that this album here has got more good songs than any of the hits put together in my eyes. I think The Damned are a great band. I've got all the albums, but this is by far the album that got me into The Damned when I've sort of like relinquished and says, look, The Damned are a good band, even though I was trying to put it off by saying, no, the Sex Pistols are better. The Damned are second from there. Some of my friends who like Stiff Little Fingers, I'll say I don't like Stiff Little Fingers. And also you wanted to sort of be the one who had the best band, and I think the most notorious band was Sex Pistols, so I used to always kind of win and say, well, I've got the best kind of band. But in reality, even though Sex Pistols wrote a brilliant album and maybe half wrote a great album in The Great Rock and Roll Swindle, The Damned show that they are such great songwriters by writing solid albums, like for 5 or 6 albums. So recently me and the Debs have seen The Damned live, and they had most of the band from this album. They had 3 members of this album, so that was great. Also, I have seen Glenn Matlock from the Sex Pistols when he's playing bass for Blondie, and I've also seen Public Image as well, which wasn't the lineup on that album apart from John Lydon. So coming in at number 7, that's Strawberries by The Damned. So at number 6 is 2011's Hardcore Will Never Die, But You Will by Mogwai. This is Mogwai are a great band. They're usually an instrumental band and they've had loads of albums out. I've got all the albums and they're all great. But for some reason, this is the album that actually you can play all the way through. And some of the other albums get a bit heavy, or some of them have got a bit like really sort of weird tracks in it. But this is the one you can play from start to finish and have a blast with it. Actually, this one here has another CD on it. It's got a bonus track on it, which has this 22-minute long song called Music from a Forgotten Future, which is absolutely brilliant as well. I don't know what it is about Mogwai. I just think I can just listen to them all day long for me. And some of the songs are absolutely just really intense. This music on here is more like shorter songs. They're more like pop songs in a certain way. I don't know. I think there's a few vocals on here, not many that you're going to hear that much on. And I think they've released a few ones on here as singles, but it's quite strange the singles are put out because they're not really singles as were. They do sing on the new albums where they sing one song on each album, the last 2 that put out. And there's just something about Mogwai from Glasgow that I just really love. I just love the fact of just what they do. They just put this stuff out and they just say, right, there's a new album. And they do all of the soundtracks as well. They've done the soundtracks for quite a few films. And like I say, when I go and see them, we stood right at the front, unfortunately. and we had a great view. We're standing right next to the guitarist, and you know, he was actually, well, he was looking at us a couple of times, probably was looking at me sort of like having a meltdown with blood spurting out my ears, probably laughing to himself at the sheer volume that we had to put up with next to the speakers. But it was an experience. We couldn't hear for a couple of days afterwards, but I was so glad to have done it. I don't think I'll ever stand next to the speakers in a Mogwai concert ever again, but at least I can say I've done it, and I've lived to tell the tale. So at number 6, that's Hardcore Will Never Die, But You Will, from Mogwai. So I've always been a fan of punk music, and I've always been a fan of fast music. When the hardcore punk scene came out in the early 80s, I was a big fan of that because it was faster, the faster you can go. Then of course that sort of changed as when I went into thrash metal. So as an honorary mention, I was really into Master of Puppets by the Metallica. Not the Metallica, by Metallica, and I think this album is absolutely brilliant, and I'm listening to it quite a lot recently, not because of the fact it's been on Stranger Things, but obviously it has been on Stranger Things, so this has made this music more accessible to people. But the one I want to talk about at number 5 is 1986's Rain and Blood by Slayer. Now to me, when you want to listen to a thrash metal, this is a great thrash metal, don't get us wrong, I do like practically every song in it. There's a couple on there that I'm not that keen on, but this one here is just absolutely, it's just annihilation of your ears from start to finish. When I first heard it, I could not believe how fast it was. I couldn't believe how fast the double bass drumming was on this. This was like something I'd never ever heard before, and it's just relentless. I think there's a couple of bits, tiny few bits in it where it goes slow, and you're talking, and this whole album is like thrash from start to finish. It doesn't let up, apart from a few tiny little breaks when it goes to like half beat, and it just goes straight back into thrash again. So if you ever want to sort of hear anything that's got the biggest like thrash, for me, the best, every song on here is a winner. There's no duff ones on here. There's no ones I think, oh, I've got to fast forward this one, because on some of the ones that came out by the big four, Metallica, Slayer, Anthrax, Megadeth, who I'm not that much a bigger fan of, I was skipping songs on them. But for this, on the 1986 all released albums, like pivotal albums, but that's a thing, pivotal, yeah.
Where's me ladders?
So in the mid 80s, these bands were going head to head, but this one won out for me. And we did get the chance, me and the devs did have a chance to go and see them before they split up. I don't think they'll stay split up, but I bet they seem like they are at the moment. And I had such a good time. I just really had to see Slayer before they split up. I do want to go and see Metallica, but they haven't shown their faces in UK for a little bit. But we'll try and get across to that. But if you want the fastest thing you've ever, I mean, there is faster music, don't get us wrong, but to me this is the speed that I like. This is the speed that I understand. Some of these ones, when they go into blast beats, they're all right, but they go a little bit too silly, a little bit too fast, and then the vocals on here are extreme, but not too extreme to the fact it's just like sludge. I don't mind that, but I couldn't listen to a full album of it. I couldn't get as much pleasure as I can out of Rain and Blood, which I think most people do see as the greatest thrash metal of all time. So at number 5, that's Rain and Blood by Slayer. So when punk and post-punk started to change around about the early 80s, there was a big influx of the New Romantics keyboard stuff. And I had heard of this band before, but I hadn't heard much of the stuff until I got in the charts. So at number 4 would have been Computer World by Kraftwerk, but I don't own that album physically, although I have it on download. In the car, I play it all the time. I've got 2 versions of Computer World by Kraftwerk. What I'm going to show here is, this is by a member of Kraftwerk, and this is called Communication by Carl Bartos. And I'm going to show you what I like about this one in a minute. You won't believe how this works. So this is a great album. But anyway, the one that I want to talk about is the fact that in 1981, Kraftwerk released Computer World. And that to me was the one that I'd heard some of the songs on the TV. Obviously, the model was on the TV, but the model wasn't on that album. The model was number 1 at the time. So the model was actually off the 1978 album, The Man Machine. It was a B-side to Computer Love, which was on Computer World. So this album, I did have it, but what I wanted to do was I sold me Kraftwerk stuff, or some of it, because I wanted to get this box set that was coming out, which I didn't really understand what it was. It's like a live box set, but it's far too much money, and I haven't got it. But I have downloaded what was on that album. It's like a live reworking of Computer World. It's quite good actually, but I do like the fact that the Computer World is, you have got the original one on CD. So anyway, this one here, it's such a good album. Now look what happens here. You've got to open it by this. Now watch it not open, but you know, there you go. So you open that, and what happens is, that's the only way to get the CD out, if you pull this thing, and when you do that, you see, I'm not going to do it too much in case it falls to bits, but I thought that was such a weird way of having this CD, and I could imagine that this will break, so I'm quite, you know, not wanting to open this too much. But this is quite a good album as well, and Carl Bartos would be someone I would like to see. I have seen Kraftwerk live. They were really good. I saw them in 2004. I saw my good friend Stephen Watson, school friend, and we went to Manchester to see them. We had a great time watching that. And we went in with headaches, believe it or not, and we came out without them, because the sound quality of a Kraftwerk concert is like just, I don't know, it's so clear that you can't, it doesn't hurt you. It's nuts. I've never experienced that at all. Now, I have seen Wolfgang Fleur doing a DJ set, and he was quite crazy actually. He used to come on with a German helmet with a big spike on it, and used to parade around the stage in the middle of his songs and just clap his hands, and he just seemed like he was on a different planet actually. Carl Bartos does some stuff. I'd like to go and see him. So yeah, so at number 4 is Computer World by Kraftwerk. So number 3 is an album by my favourite band, the Misfits. Now, the Misfits are very hard to get an album that you can say is an album, because they've released albums here, there, and then the compilations, and the discography is a mess actually, and you can't really get a definitive album. But for me, this was a definitive album. It was a real album that was released, and a proper album, but it was kind of released strangely because it had a 12-inch as well, which came out at the same time, but the 12 inches included on here, which was their last release, Die Die My Darling. So the album is 1983's Earth AD / Wolf's Blood. Now I've got to censor this cover a little bit. This is the German release. Now this, I think it's a German release, and it does have the extra songs on here, Die Die My Darling and We Bite. This album is when the Misfits turned from being kind of melodic, like slow punk, to like going into hardcore thrash. They call the singer on here Glenn Danzig Evil Elvis, because he does sound like an evil version of Elvis. And this album is played at a breakneck speed. I have seen the Misfits 5 times actually. And I've seen all the members on this album apart from Glenn Danzig. I'd like to put that right one day, but I don't know if the Misfits will ever come over here. So yeah, so unfortunately, but I have talked to them quite a few times, and I think they're all great guys. I mean, Doyle, the big guitarist, he's a man of few words. Let's just say that. But this album for me is the only one I can class as an album, because the other ones are kind of, one was a forgotten album, another one which was called Walk Among Us is quite a good album. It's not a bad album, but it's just not as good as this one, even though it's not as well produced as the other ones. It's a bit kind of sludgy. In fact, but they didn't do it. They had a mix of this album where what they did was, to make this album a bit more dirtier, they would turn the guitars on, and then they would just strum them and throw them into the recording studio as they were playing their guitars as well, to get the ultimate feedback into it, which they didn't do that. I'm grateful for that, because this album is dirty enough without them doing that. So for me, that's the most complete album they've ever done. So at number 3, that's Earth AD by the Misfits. So number 2 is 1979's Dawn of the Dickies by the Dickies. This is just an absolutely brilliant album. The songs on here are all good. The second song here, Fan Mail, is officially my favourite song of all time. Now, I've met the Dickies quite a few times actually, and I've seen them play about 5 times. Me and the Debs have seen them. I think I've seen them 5 times. She's seen them 4 times with me. And this is when I went to see them in Newcastle in 1998. And I met the band, and I got this signed by them as well. Now this one here, this is signed by the singer, Leonard Grace Phillips, the bass player at the time, Rick Dasher, and also the guitarist, Stan Lee. And I did see Stan Lee in the HMV in Newcastle, and I'd said to Deborah, I says, there's Stan Lee over there. She says, it's not. I said, it is, I can tell you, I've met him before. She goes, no, it's not. So I went up and I just said, Stan? She went, yeah. I says, can I, I was talking for a little bit, and I says, can I just tell you that you have wrote my favourite song of all time, Fan Mail. He was like, he said, wow, really? He says, honestly, I said, yeah, of course. I can't get enough of that song, and I just love it, and I just said everything about it is just like unreal. So he thanked us and that. And he was a great guy. He was with some minder, and we just had a bit of a chat. And he was looking around for some songs. And I said to him, I said, do you ever see your own CDs in HMV? He says, no. He says, no one seems really stuck by the Dickies. Now I did say I did have a thing signed by you And he said, yeah, he said, this was put out on the Dickies label. He said, we got that, no one was putting it out, so we put it out ourselves, and I think we had a good job of marketing it. I said, well, you did. And strangely enough, I did buy this one, which is the one that was put out by Captain Oi, and it's like a remastered, well, not a remaster, but it's got like extra songs on here, so it's got all the B-sides and, well, a song called Giganta and Bowling with Bedrock Barney, which was a song that was written at the same time, released at the same time as this, but it wasn't actually on that album. It was, I think it was released a year after it. But this is the classic lineup of the Dickies there. There's Stan Lee, who I was speaking to. There's Leonard Grace Phillips that I was speaking to. They are the only two people in the band now. And sadly, here is Chuck Wagon, who actually, he passed away, he killed himself actually, he shot himself. Can you believe it? And never saw them at that point. They had sort of vanished. When that happened, this catastrophe happened, they sort of took a sabbatical and they just like disappeared for quite a while before they came back again. And they've been like around forever since. So we can't wait to see the Dickies when they come back to the UK. So number 2 is Dawn of the Dickies by the Dickies. So number 1 is someone I'm a massive fan of. I've been a fan of his music. His music seemed to play through my whole childhood and me growing up and me being an adult. I heard his songs changing from, you know, from what they were to what he became. He became, with all this stuff coming out, he was always like coming out with some stuff that nobody expected him to. And of course, at number 1, it is 1972's The Rise and Fall of Ziggy Stardust and the Spiders from Mars by David Bowie. And now I love David Bowie's albums. I've got a lot of them, but for me, this is the most complete album. It does kind of tell a story about this character, Ziggy Stardust, and his rise and fall of his band, the Spiders from Mars. And to me, I like these. I'm not really too much into concept albums. Don't really care for them that much. But this one for me is kind of like a concept album that kind of works. It's got some great songs on here. I mean, every song in here for me. There's no songs in here that I go, oh, I can't be bothered with that. That's not my taste. This is just everything in here. Even though some of his other songs are kind of like Let's Dance, and I like that type of thing, and I like Scary Monsters, all that type of that. They're all like heroes. He's got some brilliant songs all over the place. But for me, this is one album. You put it on, and you're kind of transported into another world. It tells this, you know, this great kind of story of this whole bloke who was going on this journey into music. That's what I get out of it anyway. And I think that's the whole songwriting on here was, I mean, David Bowie's a great songwriter, but he had Mick Ronson with him at this point, and he just had a great backing band, I find. And I think he came into his own when I think he was floundering a little bit, because he had quite a few albums out before this, and he didn't really know what to do with stuff. But I think as soon as he got this concept into his mind, I think this is where he took off. And this is him like making good, even though some of his albums and even the stuff he had, it was like David Jones. He was, they were good, but they just weren't, they just didn't have a direction. I think he took a really good direction with this music. And I remember when I first heard this album, there was somebody, I was at my mate's house and his big brother had it on. He was playing this album and he says, yeah, listen to this, lad. So we heard it on and I was thinking, this is all right, this. And I says, who's this? Like David Bowie. And I says, is it? It didn't really sound like him because I was used to him being like Ashes to Ashes and stuff like that. He says, oh no, this is his best album. So when I listened to it, I thought, this is all right, this. So I immediately went out and got the album myself and listened to it to death. But it reminded me of a time when we used to really go to somebody's house at a night time. You used to get yourself something to eat, like maybe he used to buy us Chinese meals. So that's the first time I ever had Chinese meals. So we'd be sitting there eating with chicken fried rice and a portion of curry. Couldn't beat it. And we were listening to this album all the time. I used to say to him all the time, chuck that David Bowie album on. And it just brings back, so all of these albums bring back a lot of memories to me. And this one is probably the best memory I've got from it. Every time I play it on, I'm transported back to that bedroom, which is just down the road actually. Just sitting there and just sort of just chilling and just listening to this song and getting lost into it. It was great when you just used to sit and listen to a full album. Well, obviously you turned it over when the side ended, and you would just sit and kick back and just really just get into it. Don't think you'd really do that these days anymore. I don't think I do anyway. I listen to stuff in my car. I love it. But there's the days of listening to vinyl on especially somebody else's equipment. For some reason, I just thought it was really good. So all the new things coming out that the big brothers used to get you into, yeah, it was just a great time. So this has been a video that I've been wanting to do for a long time. I'm so glad I've done it. So thanks for watching. You take care, and I'll see you on the next video. Cheers. Do you like that one?